Welcome to Satsang. So the essence of Buddhism is about enlightenment, and this is a pretty misunderstood subject. People think they understand enlightenment, but usually they don't. Every human being is a Buddha, but a sleep Buddha, a Buddha that doesn't recognise itself, hasn't recognised itself. So awakening is when the Buddha within, or beingness, whatever you want to call it, recognises itself, becomes aware of itself. And this has absolutely nothing to do with the mind. It is not the mind that becomes enlightened. It is not the ego that becomes enlightened. That's not possible, because the ego itself is a dream. That's aware of the mind, pure awareness, beingness, becomes aware of itself. If this is temporary, it's called a Satori. If it is permanent, it is called enlightenment. I brought along the cage today with the Buddha in, and the Buddha's sleeping. This is a Buddha that's not aware of itself. It's there, the Buddha's there, the same as in every human being. The Buddha is there. The Buddha's not somewhere else. It's there, it's inside of you. But it's not aware of itself, so it's sleeping. When the Buddha becomes aware of itself, watch out. The cage represents the mind. The bars of the cage basically are made up of belief systems and fear. And so for the Buddha to be supported in awakening, for awareness to become aware of itself, the mind needs to be in a space where it will support it. And so in Buddhism, they talk about developing an equanimous mind. This is a mind that is not thrown around by outside influences, not affected by attack or love or anything else. It stays even. And this is a mind that has been trained to do that through practice. The cage is the mind. And so in Buddhism, same as in Hinduism or Sufism, it's about teaching the mind to be quiet. Meditation, the practice of meditation, mindfulness training is all about teaching the mind to become quiet. The same as yoga, if it's truly followed through for what it was created, is about the mind becoming quiet, silent and still. Because it is a quiet mind that will support enlightenment, will support awareness, becoming aware of itself and staying aware of itself, enlightenment. When the Buddha awakens, when the Buddha recognizes itself and stays aware of itself, all fear is gone, doesn't exist anymore, because the survival mechanism will have dropped, the ego will have dropped. And so there'll be no fear, there'll be no anger. It's a very, very different way to live in the world, because there isn't the same reference points. The ego makes up its reference points of projections to the future based on past experience and belief systems about itself. If we take all those away, all those reference points away, the ego falls down. And if we look at those reference points, the past, the projections to the future and belief systems, they're all mind trips, they're all imaginary. So the ego itself is made up of imagination. It's not real. And so that's why it can't ever wake up, because it's not real. Beingness, what we truly are, who we truly are, is real. And it's always here. It's just one step back. And so for most human beings, awareness is on the mind. And the mind, through the senses, is aware of the world. And so the person who's not awake lives basically as the world and their mind sensations. The sensations through the body. Someone who's awake lives as the sky. When awareness is aware of itself, there is an experience of no reference points, an experience of being everything at once and nothing at once. which is a little bit hard to comprehend. It needs to be experienced. It needs to happen. People here who have had Satoris know what I'm talking about, because this is the common explanation for it. This is ultimate freedom to wake up. Desires have dropped, attachments have dropped. You cannot in any way possibly be controlled. It is over. The mind is in a state of surrender, and beingness knows itself. It is awake. Are there any questions, statements, or challenges to this teaching this evening? Yep.
You're talking about the ego. So if I am the ego, my personality.
Can we turn that down, please? Sorry for drop. Is that what's making the noise? Okay, just turn it off, because we've got the other air conditioning system happening here. Oh, look, that's so much nicer. There's another air conditioning system happening. We might need to shut this door because it's a refrigerated air conditioning system. And I think the laundry door might need shutting. If you could lock that one as well, thanks. It's a hot night. It's been a hot day. Sorry, back to you.
I'm just curious about what the ego is.
It's an identification with the body and with itself, with the mind. It's a part of the mind that identifies itself, says I, me, mine, ownership. That drops too. Then when that drops, when awareness becomes aware of itself, there is a sense that we are one, that there is no two, just one. Hello at the back there.
Can we turn awareness onto itself? How does Buddha wake up?
It can happen at any time, pretty much. Satoris can happen at any time, but a methodology that works is self-inquiry, asking the question, who am I? In Zen Buddhism, they ask the question, am I? And they answer it. So the question is, who am I? And the first answer would probably be, I'm a man. That answer is then immediately discounted, and the question is begun again, who am I? Whatever answer comes, I'm energy. It is then discounted. Then the question arises again, who am I? This particular methodology is used by the Zen practitioners, and they will do it all day long for days and days and days on end. I did this particular methodology in Italy for 7 days straight in a group that was doing this called Enlightenment Intensive back in 1985. No, it was 87. We did it for a week in quiet, and you're left with nothing, absolutely nothing. At the end of 87, after the retreat, I was still practicing while walking along the beachfront in Atterdale. I'd started at 6 in the morning and it was about 10. I'd been walking up and down the beachfront, self-inquiring, asking, who am I? Answering the question and discounting it. Around 10 o'clock, I experienced myself as the universe. It was my first major Satori as a result of this particular methodology of self-inquiry. Hello.
Hi. What if someone doesn't want to wake
I don't see a problem with that at all. If you're not interested in enlightenment, that's fine. The Buddha spent 40 years of his life walking around trying to help people who were interested in enlightenment wake up. Because it's ultimate freedom. There's no freedom in living as an ego. Yep.
Did you ever just become enlightened or awakened by accident? Like just out of nowhere? If you were not a particularly spiritual person, perhaps you were even not a very nice person or something? Did you have to actually try hard to reach enlightenment?
Okay, so I've been at the game now for 40 odd years and I haven't met anyone yet that's happened to. The people who I have met who have woken up have done the work on preparing the mind for enlightenment. Because if awakening does occur and the mind isn't ready to support that, well, it's not going to. And awareness will go back to the contracting mind. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I have heard of people who have woken up. And they claim that it's because they prepared themselves in past lives. But I have never met those people. Yes?
When you were speaking before, you mentioned the work. Can you please elaborate on what the work is?
Well, really it's just an undoing. We've all been created as defense mechanisms. When we were born, we were pretty open and undefended. And then as time went by, we developed a whole pile of defense systems which built into what we are today, the human being, the mind. And those defense systems keep us contracting against the world. Unfortunately, they keep awareness on them too. And so people suffer. The more they contract, the more they resist the world, the more they suffer. The work is undoing those defense systems, undoing the things that contract us, removing any belief system that supports those. And so in Buddhism, we're looking through the mind to see what it is that's in the way, what obstacles are in the way, what's supporting us contracting against life, and then finding a way to remove that. And that is the work. But it's really just an undoing, a reverse engineering of what has already occurred. So it was Jesus that said, you need to become like little children, like babies, to enter my kingdom of heaven. Well, to wake up, the mind needs to be that undefended, that vulnerable, that open. Yes?
What would you say the first steps would be to go that way?
If I wanted to become a plumber, I would actually go and apprentice myself to a plumber. If I wanted to become an electrician, I would apprentice myself to an electrician. If I wanted to wake up, I'd find someone who was awake and have them show me how. That's, as far as I'm concerned, the first steps, and that was my path. Yes? It doesn't look like anything externally, but internally it means there's absolute silence and stillness and an absence of an I, an absence of the thing that moves. So you meet someone who's awake, and if you're sensitive enough, you'll feel the stillness in them, you'll feel the silence in them, you'll feel the presence of them. They won't have the thing that's moving inside. So it doesn't have a physical look. It has an internal look though. So when we look at statues of the Buddha with the eyes closed, like this one up here, that's an image of what's inside, not what's outside. The Buddha was a very active man 2,500 years ago. Every morning he'd get up and he'd try and help people wake up. Every morning he got up and he tried to teach the Dhamma. He was very, very active. He was very in the world. He wasn't sitting like that all day long.
Enlightened people are aware of that, or can they just not know and be like that?
If you're awake, you know you're awake. You can't possibly miss it because it is so, so different than being ego-based. It's like a quantum difference. There's no connection. In ego-based reality, you experience yourself as an I that is here somewhere. In being-based reality, you are everything without reference points. It's very different. There's no center. If anything, there's an absence. Hello.
What fueled your curiosity to work through resistances and obstacles to develop awareness?
I got interested in openness when I was a teenager, when I realised that openness is quite attractive and closure is not. And I'd already moved into business, and I recognised that people who were open had a better rapport with everyone than people who were closed, because we tend to be more trusting of people who are open rather than closed. So I started looking at the different ways I was closed when I was a teenager, and I started to open up then, finding ways to remove whatever was closed. And that led me into spirituality eventually, because I realised, there's something else here. There's something else here besides living as an ego. And I didn't find it in the Christian sense, because I was a Christian back then. And I started looking at Eastern religions and realised that there's another possibility here. There's a possibility that we actually aren't what we think we are. We're not this ego. We're not this thing that comes and goes, but we're something way, way greater than that. And so an interest came up in finding out what that was about. Yes, at the back there.
Where do you place compassion when you are enlightened?
Compassion?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a couple of things that happen. In moving, in awareness becoming aware of itself, the mind pretty much drops. But in that openness, there's also the potential, if it hasn't already happened, of the heart awakening. And when the heart awakens, love flows through the body, flows and around the body, and it affects the mind. And when the mind's affected by love, there is nothing but compassion for all beings, good, bad, and ugly, without judgment. If there isn't love present, you can have a type of compassion, but it's not the same as the compassion that comes from love affecting the mind. And so those who wake up, generally speaking, spend the rest of their life trying to help others wake up. Hello at the back there.
Right. So you're asking the question of who are you, and
Yep.
not being able to find an answer. And so I'm wondering what you got out of that was that it's like sort of smashes all of your delusions,
Yeah.
and that's sort of the purpose of it, and then that therefore will open you up.
Can do.
It can do, right?
Zen methodologies are quite brutal. It's very difficult to ask that question for 7 days. and answer it. Try it and see. But I fell in love with the methodology because I started to feel the freedom in there of being a nobody, going nowhere with nothing to do. I started to feel the essence of the silence and stillness of beingness, and it's very beautiful.
Did you feel a confusion?
No, I knew what the methodology was supposed to do. I had studied it. I'd studied the process. That doesn't help much. You still have to do it. Understanding doesn't get you anywhere, really. What works in raising consciousness levels is practice.
I'm kind of feeling like the more into it you look, the more you realise that you don't know anything, and that confusion.
Oh, yeah, you could get confused. If you wanted to be confused, or you could just accept that you don't know.
Yeah, that's the purpose of it.
Not really. The purpose of that form of self-inquiry is to wake up, which has nothing to do with the mind. The mind actually needs to get out of the way. It's in the way. It's the veil they talk about.
Doesn't that create confusion? Like, 'cause when the mind
Not if you're accepting it. If you're not accepting it, I guess it could cause confusion, but it depends on whether you're accepting or not. After you do it for 7 days, you do get very accepting. It's relentless. Yeah.
Is someone who is enlightened receive external energy that could disturb the enlightenment?
It's usually external energy that supports it in the form of someone who's already awake. Someone who's awake is putting out an energy field that will support the awakening of other human beings. I'm not sure of your question though. What are you actually asking me?
The enlightened person can put out the energy, which is good, but is there a danger to receive the bad one, or has to protect himself?
Oh, someone who's enlightened. Someone who's enlightened has surrendered completely. They don't protect themselves from anything. If you need protection after enlightenment, there's something wrong with the enlightenment. Because the only thing that ever needs protection is the ego. Beingness doesn't need any form of protection. It is actually untouchable. The only thing that's touchable is the mind, the identified mind. And when that surrenders unconditionally, now you don't have any obstacles in the way. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
When you spoke about being nothing and how beautiful it is, what keeps us going back to wanting to be somebody?
Well, it's your habit. It's the belief you are the body, you are the mind. It's pretty strong, and unless you actually have a Satori where you get to glimpse reality, you'll probably continue to believe that. After you've had a Satori, it'll put a lot of doubt into that for you. So when I had my first Satori in 1987, I realized I wasn't an ego and I wasn't a body, that I was beingness. But I came back to living as ego with the knowledge that I wasn't the ego. The only way to really be free of the ego, really be free, is to wake up continuously, to be enlightened. Okay. Yeah.
Just on that confusion point, is there like an identity crisis that happens as part of
I guess if you went into resistance there would be, but that wasn't my experience. My experience was I enjoyed getting rid of everything. It was like having a backpack full of rocks and you're climbing a hill and suddenly one of the rocks goes, it's better, and then another one goes, it's better. So for me, when things started dropping away, there was a rejoicing, not a confusion.
So that to me speaks about an attitude that you had about your practice or your quest. What was your attitude?
Well, I had a spiritual teacher, an Indian teacher, and I understood that the ego doesn't make it. I understood that the ego is actually in the way, and that as you go higher in consciousness, it drops away. And so when I noticed it dropping away, I was happy about that because I knew I was headed in the right direction. See, in the West, it's about, in a lot of ways, personal growth is about becoming bigger, better, and more powerful. In higher consciousness, it's about becoming less than, not more than. It's the opposite. Hello.
When you were speaking about nothing moving inside and someone that's enlightened, are you referring to the mind or the body and physical sensations in the body, like emotions and that sort of thing?
Just the mind. Emotions are a part of the mind. They drop away too. Just silence and stillness. Hello.
Hello. So does that mean an enlightened person would never cry or get angry or feel upset?
They might cry, but they wouldn't get angry. See, anger would be a belief in victimness. You see, it's very hard to be angry unless you're a victim of something, either yourself, another person, or a situation. And in waking up, a mature mind is required. A mature mind takes full responsibility that it makes itself feel. It doesn't blame other people, the world, or even itself because it's actually mature. It's only immature minds that blame. So when we talk about developing a mind that will support enlightenment, we're talking about a mature mind that doesn't fall victim of anger. In Buddhism, anger is considered a defeat. Not by existence, but by yourself. You've defeated yourself.
What about sadness or grief or...
Emotions like that can appear, but they're like clouds in the sky. The sky is so big. Clouds come, they go. The sky remains. The Buddha, or the awakened one, knows themselves as the sky. Things come, they go. The sky remains untouched. So someone who's awake may show emotion. Hello.
Is that the same for rationality as a mechanism of serving the ego, or trying to justify itself by rationalizing?
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding your question.
Like you're saying that emotions, they just come and go,
Hmm.
and it's just part of the mind.
Hmm.
Is that the same with rationality?
What is rationality?
Well, like trying to like justify and reason and all these things, and it just serves an ego.
I'm still not following you, I'm sorry.
So I'm saying like the use of reason is it trails the ego.
That's still mind. Someone who's awake is not living as mind any longer, they're living as beingness. And beingness doesn't think. It's absolutely still and absolutely silent and absolutely beautiful. The thinking mind comes and goes. After enlightenment, the chances of it being noisy is almost impossible. It quietens down to nothing because it's no longer entertaining itself. It's actually an adoration of beingness because it is so beautiful to be awake. It is very, very beautiful. Sometimes it's referred to as Sat Chit Ananda, truth, consciousness, bliss. When the mind is experiencing bliss, it's very quiet. Yes?
Can I ask you what age were you when you achieved it?
Awakening occurred 18 years ago, this coming June, June the 1st, 29th to 30th of May. And up until that point, there had been thousands of Satoris. But at that date, the Satori stayed, and it's now been that way for nearly 18 years.
I'm sorry, you said 1,000 Satoris. You went through 1,000.
Thousands. So that's glimpses of reality. So I'd be driving the car and I'd be ego-based, and all of a sudden I'd be the universe. And it was bizarre because the switch is so large, it's not a small switch. Hello in the back there. Oh, hang on, before you do, there was a lady down here that I missed. Yes?
When you're awake, do you have intuition, or is intuition a function?
So what's happened for me is the mind's dropped away, so I don't live in the mind, I don't live in the analysing mind. If I want an answer to something, I just wait and the answer appears without progressive analysing. Does that make sense? Yeah. At the back there.
Were you able to get in touch with the silence and stillness before you started practicing self-inquiry?
Yeah, I started meditating in 1978, I think, or... No, it was a bit later than that, in the 1982. And I started finding the silence in meditation. But that was the silence of the mind, not beingness. So meditation can silence your mind and can quieten the mind right down, but beingness is different. The silence and the stillness of beingness is different. It has a different quality. No mind is still mind in a way. When awareness is aware of itself, it is different than that. In Buddhism, no mind is the place the monks sit waiting for enlightenment. And they reach no mind through the practice of mindfulness and meditation. Yeah.
Were you ever complaining to Satori?
The Satoris blew the I away completely. They blew the analysing mind away completely. There was nothing left to be frightened. There was a complete absence for quite a period of time. And then slowly the I came back. Slowly the identified mind came back, but slowly. And it was quite aware of what had happened. It was quite aware that awakening had occurred. Because it's not something you'd miss. Is someone here?
How would you deal with someone who might say something unkind to you or act maybe aggressively? How would you deal with that?
Whatever I want to say. Depends. Nothing inside is going to move. It depends. If they're one of my students, I actually might turn it around on them. If it's somebody I don't know, I mightn't say anything. I don't have a motivation to hurt anyone, and nothing anyone can say can hurt me. That's not a possibility. And so there's not a reaction. There won't be any reaction. There'll be a response, but it would depend on what's said and why it's been said and who said it. Does that answer that question? Yes.
I think you said that
When awareness is aware of itself, it is all silent and all still and there's nothing happening. It's like if you know yourself as a sky and a cloud appears in the sky, what does it matter? It's irrelevant really, it's just a cloud, it'll come and it goes. What remains is the sky, always. Things come, they go, the sky remains. We are sky, we are everything, we are the universe, we are beingness. That is our true nature. And that is the goal of Buddhism, of Hinduism, of Taoism, of Sufism, to wake up to our true nature and live as that. But there's no body that wakes up to it. It's not an I that wakes up. In awakening, you know you are everything and you are everyone. So that sense of separation disappears completely. Yes?
When awakening occurred, because you said you had thousands of Satoris beforehand, why wasn't the awakening a Satori? Why was it awakening? What made that happen at that point?
The final awakening?
Yeah.
I have no idea. I don't know. I was surprised by it because it lasted all day and then I went to sleep, and when I woke up it was still there. I was still experiencing myself as a sky, and every day for months I'd wake up and it was still there, and I was surprised because I didn't expect awakening to occur. No, I was like everybody else. I was used to living as an ego. I was used to living as something that was trapped. And that was for 40-something years. 44, 46 years. I was used to living as an ego. And suddenly I wasn't living as an ego. It was very different. It was surprising. Hello? I haven't had anyone successfully wake up fully yet. I've had hundreds of people have Satoris. For someone to wake up, a couple of things have to happen. First, they need to have a mind that will support enlightenment. And secondly, there's another thing involved, it's called karma. Some teachers call it grace. There's a certain grace that occurs, or karma that occurs. Final freedom from samsara.
Could you explain that again? Karma.
Whatever we put into life, we get back. Yeah.
Does that mean that we can't born have the possibility to enlighten?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Does that mean that because of the karma, we don't have all the possibility to get enlightened?
Well, I didn't think I had the karma to become enlightened because I hadn't led a very pure life. I'd been a businessman till I was 33, and I was pretty ruthless. I was very successful in business, but I wouldn't say I was straight. But at the age of 33, I had a near-death experience and started to see that even though I was materially quite wealthy, I was poor, I was broke because I didn't have heart. And so I gave my businesses away and went in search of heart at the age of 33. And once I started to find heart, I went into service to humanity. And 11 years after that, awakening occurred.
How did you find your heart?
It's a funny story. Initially I found it because I was holding my newborn baby girl, and heart just appeared out of nowhere. I was overwhelmed with love, but there was also a recognition that it wasn't me that was loving. Love was present, and it was so beautiful, so delightful, so real. And that is when I got an understanding that the mind doesn't love, love appears and then the mind claims it. And I realized that I hadn't had much love in my life, mostly because I was too defended and too closed, because love tends to appear in openness, not in closure. And so I set out around Australia looking for my heart. And as I went around Australia, I didn't have any money because I'd given my companies to my staff and I'd gone broke. And so as I went around Australia, I started becoming in service of people, helping them, assisting them, running meditations, whatever I could do. And I started to find that I was actually loving what I was doing. I was loving being in service. I was loving helping other humans. And so I decided to dedicate my life to the way of the heart, which is the way of service to others. And I didn't have a great deal of skill besides being a businessman. So I went back to school and trained as a naturopath and a psychotherapist so I could have some skills that I could help people with. Yeah? Yes?
With love and awakening of the heart, is that important in awakening of the mind? Or is that just...
It's not a requirement. It's just that I couldn't see any point in living any other way.
Do you have to be enlightened to have awakening of the heart?
No, awakening of the heart happened for me nearly 11 years before. And it was very beautiful. It changed everything in my life. It changed my whole trajectory. But it was difficult to turn a Sherman tank into a loving machine. Yes.
Is it necessary, are there awake people that don't have awakening of the heart?
I haven't met them, so I don't know. In Australia there's not very many people who are awake, and I'm not interested in travelling overseas to visit awake people. When awakening first occurred 18 years ago, I got a great deal of invitations to go overseas and hold satsangs. But what's the point in going overseas where there's a whole pile of other satsang teachers who are awake when there's nobody here? Might as well stay here. One of my teachers advised me not to stay here. She said that I should actually go because it's very hard to teach in your own hometown. Your friends and your people who know you won't accept where you're at. And that was true. But the beauty of awakening is you don't care. What other people think of you, you really don't care. They're just aspects of yourself anyway. Hello. I lived in India for 5 months in '89, and while I was there, I did the self-inquiry, and there as well, and I also did a Sufi training for a month, which was the most sickening experience I've ever had, because all we did all day long was whirl, from 6 in the morning until 6 at night, whirling around. And it does. You can't actually think and whirl. So the Sufis got it right. It's a methodology that stops the mind. And you whirl and you whirl and you whirl, and eventually you fall to the ground and you're absolutely in no mind, which is the waiting place for enlightenment. And that is the Sufi methodology towards enlightenment. When the month was over, I was quite happy. Yeah.
With that table there, you have the sleeping Buddha inside the cage. Is the cage that's just everything of the mind and all the contractions, all the limiting beliefs, that's just mind stuff, the cage?
Yeah. The best chance someone has of having an open mind is when they're born, because they haven't developed it yet. But as adults, we actually have to reverse engineer and open up. And that's quite a task. It takes a lot of effort to open up again. because the defense systems are default, and in a lot of cases we're unconscious to them. And so you meet someone who's awake and you'll find they're very, very, very open.
I've met people who are teachers, and they claim to be teachers of awakening, but they're fidgety, they're anxious, they suffer fear and anxiety and anger, and it seems like they have all the right words, but no lived experience. And so how do you tell if someone really truly knows enlightenment, or if they just sort of book learn?
Yeah. So watch them very closely. Be very careful who you choose to be a teacher. Because in the spiritual world, there is more fraud than any other world there is. Yeah.
You said that no mind was kind of like the waiting room for enlightenment.
Kind of.
Is that different to preparing the mind for enlightenment?
If you can stay in no mind, you've prepared the mind for enlightenment. And so you're a yoga teacher, and yoga is all about finding stillness and silence. Originally, it was originated to support enlightenment, to find enlightenment. And so the asanas are designed to take you to silence and stillness. Modern yoga has missed that. They think it's for something else. But true yoga is about finding that silence and stillness inside, quietening the mind, opening up all the channels. Yeah.
So this Sufi methodology of trailing can only give you a temporary experience of your mind.
No, I can prepare you for it.
You also have to do the
Work.
undoing of belief system.
Yeah, well, to be a Sufi in the Muslim culture, you would have had to have learned a great deal about surrender. Because it wasn't popular to be a Sufi. Yes, there was someone down there who was waving. Yes.
Just back to when you were saying awakening of the heart,
Mm.
that different to say, the Satoris that you had, was that like the first one, or is it something different?
Awakening of the heart is different, yes. You can have an awakening of the heart and not have a clue as to who you are, really. And when the heart awakens, it's very beautiful. It affects the mind to the degree where rules aren't required anymore, because you will take care of everybody you meet no matter what happens. Because it's so beautiful. You love everyone. You even love the bad people. You love everybody. It's so beautiful. It's quite often called the true gem of consciousness, the heart.
And do you think that puts you on the path to wanting to achieve enlightenment?
Not necessarily, no. I think when people start out towards enlightenment, they're ambitious. They're desiring freedom. They're desiring probably to get away from the suffering of the world. And that will take you so far. And at some point, the mind starts to fall in love with beingness, fall in love with the silence and the stillness and the beauty of it. And it's only in that love affair that it becomes willing to die for truth. Because that's actually what happens. The ego dies. Unconditional surrender is a death. If you're still just trying to get away from pain or just get freedom from this world, you're unlikely to want to die for it. But in love, in love you'll die for it. In love you'll die for someone else as well. Love is the most beautiful thing. And so people who do wake up at the last points are absolutely in love with truth. Absolutely, and they have a love affair with, sometimes it's called the beloved, truth being the beloved. And in that love affair they disappear. They dissolve. Does that make sense?
It did at first, but not so much at the end.
Okay. Yeah.
With the Bhakti path of enlightenment, is it possible to become enlightened just from serving others, or is there other practices involved in that?
I believe so. Most people who wake up come through the Bhakti path. The Jnana path is quite difficult. The Jnana path is usually a path of discipline and denial. And the Bhakti path is the path of service and devotion. In that devotion, the mind becomes willing to let go, willing to surrender. Yes, at the back there.
All children are awake, even awake.
Sorry?
Children, kids, baby are awake.
No. For awareness to be aware of itself, it only happens in an adult mind that's being supported by an adult mind. Children are very beautiful. They have a very pristine energy field. They have a sattvic energy field because they haven't developed a mind yet that produces density through angsting, through thinking, through worrying and all these other things that the mind does. So babies are very pristine energetically, and that's very attractive, that pristineness, that freshness. As an adult, you can develop that simply by not living in your head anymore, by living in reality. And so the mind doesn't contract anymore, it stays open no matter what is happening. And this sort of mind is also sattvic, open, fresh, alive, not dreaming anymore. Yeah.
Would you, like you choose to live in an area, in a quiet area, is it because you're enlightened, or is your personality, or is it possible to be enlightened and live in society with, or the business, or the craziness of the city life?
Yeah. So awakening occurred for me when I was living in Atterdale, in the suburb, Atterdale. And I was married and I had 3 children. And I had to continue to try to support them. It was difficult though because I was working mostly as a psychotherapist. And people would come and I couldn't talk because in the first year of enlightenment I lost the will to talk. I loved the silence so much, I just stayed silent. And so people would come and they'd sit with me and they didn't like it and they wouldn't come back. And so I lost my client base, but at the same time a group of people who were interested in truth started coming to satsang and meditations that I was holding. And so there was a changeover. But right through awakening I was with my family and my children. We homeschooled our children, 2 of them. One was from another marriage, so that one stayed there. But I never left the world in a way. I could have done. I could have gone to a monastery, which would have been probably easier, but that would have been not taking responsibility as for what was around. So for me, awakening was very much in the marketplace. Okay. Hello?
If people are pursuing enlightenment because they want to be free and they don't want to suffer, is there a risk of falling into a trap where you're doing it, you want to serve your desire?
Sure. One of the last desires to drop is the desire for enlightenment. But if you're going to have a desire, that's the best desire to have, because what you're desiring is freedom.
So desiring enlightenment will be the thing that holds you back from actually attaining it.
It has the potential to hold you back, yes, because it's a contraction. Yes. But as you get closer to enlightenment, as beingness becomes more prominent, there's such a love affair develops with beingness, such a surrender to beingness, that everything drops away.
So then you just desire nothing.
Pretty much. You see that what happens towards enlightenment is certain fears will come up because you're entering the unknown. And so the fear of death will come up, and that needs to be surrendered. And the fear of insanity will come up because that's the fear of losing control, which is similar to the fear of death, losing control. And that has to be surrendered as well. So by the time enlightenment's appearing, you've surrendered to everything. You've let go of everything. And it's been very easy because beingness is very beautiful. So it's not like it's hard to surrender at that stage. It's easy. Does that make sense? The thing about it is you don't know if you'll survive enlightenment.
And so would you recommend like pursuing enlightenment as opposed to just saying just stop desiring anything now?
What I say is practice openness, it'll take you everywhere. You see, if we practice openness, our life becomes more beautiful. In openness, we become more attractive. In openness, we're less defended, we're less likely to react to the world. So if we practice openness, we're preparing ourselves for awakening, we're preparing ourselves for higher consciousness. From my perspective, openness counts for everything. It is past the time. It has passed the time. Thank you for satsang. Good to see you brave hearts here tonight.